Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my wonderful interviews. Today we are going to head down to Cornwall, a lovely place. I've been there many times. It's a beautiful part of the world, except it does seem to be being targeted by all the negative forces, and I'm not sure I'm happy with that, as indeed neither should you be, because these negative forces are all over the places. We're going to talk to a farmer who is standing as an independent. He is from near Falmouth in South Cornwall, in a place called Penryn, and he's putting himself up to fight the farmer's corner as well as yours as an everyday member of the public. And we're going to find out what exactly is going in Cornwall, because I've heard about the various things in the sky, the chemtrails or the geoengineering. And of course, we've heard about all that rewilding. Suddenly we need huge swathes of the countryside with animals roaming wildly about and no human allowed anywhere near them. So let's go and find out all about it. My farmer in question is Peter Lawrence, and he joins me now. Hello, Peter.
Good morning, Richard. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's lovely to have you on board. Now, I don't know how much of all that waffle that I've just said is true, but it does seem to be the stuff that people have been telling me, that rewilding is going mad in Cornwall. They're trying to eradicate all of small farmers for reasons that I cannot really configure or comprehend in a logical, nice, general universe that we would want to live in. And that the chemtrails are blasting the skies left, right and centre and potentially leaving us with a great famine. How much of that is true, or is most of that just poppycock?
Well, I'm afraid I can't disagree with much of it at all, in my opinion. Before we start, well done to you for waking up and not shutting up.
No, well, I think it's important not to shut up.
The more of us that do that, the better it's going to be for humanity as we move forward. So, well done you.
Thank you very much. Just doing my little bit, you know.
Yeah, good man. Well, yes, I've been aware of the geoengineering issue for close on 15 years now. I originally just felt something was being randomized with the weather patterns before I was consciously aware of it, having been farming and market gardening for 25 years. There was always an established pattern and an established variation in the weather. But you kind of had this inner sense that you knew it was, naturally occurring or to be expected. But around the mid 2000s, just the randomization started to become so noticeable that it was hard to ignore. Extreme summer downpours, just things happening topsy-turvy where they never previously happened. And so I had an inherent sense of knowing that something was going on with the weather, but wasn't consciously aware of it until I joined a fantastic little group called Penzance Truth Action. And back in the day, they had some really good meetings and quite a good group there of 200 people plus in the Penzance area. And there was various talks, alternative health and crop circles, UFOs, bunch of really interesting people,
Yes.
and interesting topics. And on one of the occasions, a chap came down called Andrew Johnson, who you may know of. He's an independent researcher from the UK, and he did a talk on the sort of geoengineering, to put a better phrase,
Yes.
climate engineering, geoengineering, and that, of course, covered the whole chemtrail or persistent contrail issue. And I bought his book and looked into it. And of course, then the whole thing just fell into place. And as soon as you're aware of it and looking up, it's absolutely undeniable. The trails that go from one side of the horizon to the other, they don't disappear. They slowly spread out. You have this high level milky haze, forming clouds. Hey presto, the rain comes the next day. So at the very least, I was aware of some form of low pressure weather system extension going on. And of course, as soon as you research into cloud seeding, you realize just how old that technology is. And how that's been used in military applications for nearly 100 years. So obviously that one was in the bag, kind of thing. And then latterly, of course, with the whole push towards global warming and that completely false narrative coming from the establishment, hey presto, you've got the solution to a problem that doesn't exist in the first place, which is the solar radiation management aspect. So putting it all together, it's hard to deny that this is going on. In fact, it is going on, in my opinion. And I did a considerable post on this in the campaign group that I run down here called Farmers Movement Cornwall. And I have to say, it was probably the most well-liked post and the one that received the most public feedback. So I've got about 18 proposals up on the Facebook group now relating to my thoughts on agricultural policy and how to protect farmers and the public, etc. But the one about geoengineering really hit the spot. So it's encouraging for me because I was actually out on the streets of my local towns a good 10 years ago campaigning about this. And I did so for 2 or 3 years exhaustively, and I actually burned out on it. You felt that you were just so far to the beginning of the adoption of an early technology. You were kind of like an early Christian or an early technology adopter. There was just so few of you that were aware of this that it was very hard. So it's fantastic actually to see how it's progressed, even though I sort of dropped out of that and I carried on with my business and sort of just had to leave it for other reasons. But it's been fantastic to revisit it in the recent years and have so many to see the progress of that movement. And in fact, I had a brilliant thing in a shop locally recently where I was checking out and we were talking about the weather, and the lady who was behind me started saying, oh, well, it's probably not natural, Did you see the thing on the BBC about the meteorological office in Dubai stating that the floods there were due to cloud seeding? And I started agreeing with her and talking to them. Between the two of us, the poor checkout lady was sort of pinned back against the wall going, oh my goodness. Yeah. So it was really great. And so keep going. Don't ever despair is the message with this. I know it's hard, but social media is really making a difference.
And we do see the pictures popping up now all over the place of the skies, so that people are, slowly becoming aware. And the old argument of contrails is beginning to fall out of favour, even if people don't know quite what's being sprayed and what the implications of it are. They are aware that something's going on up there, I feel.
Yes, they are. And, like I say, Telegram has some excellent groups on there. Support your independent media. You really must. It's vital. The Light Paper, the UK Column, there's great organisations out there. So if you can afford it, just give them a contribution, a few pounds every month. Keep going, keep talking, and be prepared for adverse reactions from people who can't take it on. Be gentle, adopt a bring them to you kind of approach. Is having done this for many years, you can go in too hard sometimes. So you have to meet people where they are and gently sow seeds, and just gently bring them to you. And we need to do that in all areas. We need to do that in politics. People talk about the Overton window being this very narrow conversation that without anything actually being written down or said, that the whole political landscape is being confined to this fairly centrist or actually left of centre argument or conversation, a very liberal authoritarian dialect now. And so, you need to keep talking and expanding that, and
absolutely.
And we don't go along that with that, our silence, it can be deemed as tacit consent to that. So don't silence. Say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. Look at me over here. There's a whole new world, and we are here. And hold a good account of yourself. Keep studying. You need to just keep learning as much as you can, and and eventually we will get there, and a movement is building, and it just takes time. These things always take time. If you look at the populist parties, in fact, which are now coming to more prominence on the European continent, that they have histories that go back not even 1 decade, 2 or 3 decades. So I'm afraid it is a long-term game. But that said, the exponential nature of social media and independent media uptake can really change that, and it will happen and can happen very quickly once it gets going. Once you've got past that 3 or 4% of people that are prepared to really stand out and actually make those daily sacrifices, as we do.
Yes.
Once you get to 3 or 4% of those people who are meeting every Saturday in their local area to just hand leaflets out for an hour and then have a social, and from that little group, who knows what could happen.
Exactly. Well, exactly, and we do have to stay completely positive and on the what would you call it, on the not aggressive, but have a campaign of I can't think of the right terminology, a purpose, a movement. We've got to keep on that. So listen, I want to get into, if I can, what's going on in the farming world generally, and how these things like the chemtrails are affecting farmers. First of all, what kind of farming do you do, Peter?
Well, I was a commercial salad leaf grower for 17 years. A little bit of baby leaf spinach, but my main product was a mixed leaf salad bag, mixed baby leaves, as they're known. This is a ready-made salad that domestic customers and hotels can use. And I was the main supplier of that product to the Cornish market, the largest independent supplier for 17 years or so. I'm semi-retired now. I've got a small diversified project here on the farm, so I've got a second income from that, which has freed me up a little bit from the main farming. We got derailed with COVID.
Right.
We built the business up and we had to stop it because most of our trade was to hotels and restaurants, which were obviously closed. So
yes,
we had to have a rethink and a pause. We managed to survive. We did a local produce click and collect. We put a web store up, and we did boxes once a week, and we bought in bread and eggs and milk from all Cornish producers. We had about 30 other Cornish producers supplying us alongside my veg, and that went very well initially. Of course, it dropped off towards the end as life got back to normal. So coming out of that, we decided not to farm commercially again, as I was heading into my 50s, and my parents, who've always helped me, were approaching their 80s. So we decided not to go back to the full-time farming mission. So I just grow part-time now organically. I've got a small 1/2 acre organic no-dig market garden, Charles Dowding style, and
right.
I buy 6 or 8 customers locally. So I'm happy with that, and it's given me a bit of extra time to look into other things, hence forming the Farmers Movement Cornwall campaign group here in Cornwall, and latterly standing as an MP, an independent MP in the upcoming general election.
So right, okay. So I mean, that's really interesting. There's a couple of things there I just wanted to pick up on. Isn't it interesting that during the lockdown, then, that there you are with all the other farmers supporting organic and local and good quality food, whilst people perhaps didn't want to go to the supermarkets, which probably was improving some people's health. Although we know a lot of people in lockdown were putting on a lot of weight because they were eating all the wrong kind of foods. And then now we get back to normal. It's a shame that wasn't a pin in which people could have said, actually, do you know what? We just need to eat more healthily, local and good quality produce. And it seems that sort of slipped back a bit. And the other thing that you said there was, because you're now communicating with lots of other farmers, I'd be interested to know what's been the effect of, I mean, this year, for example, we have seen, apart from fairly recently, when clearly the pilots are having days off, or the aeroplanes are being serviced, we pretty much have had white skies since November last year, and we've had a lot of rain at the beginning of the year. What's been the effect of farmers, and what do you think is likely to come about regarding harvests and food production this year?
Well, there's no doubt that I believe we're heading for food shortages. Wheat yields are approximately 30% down this year because of the wet winter. So that's going to have a knock-on effect. It will, at the very least, cause spikes in the price for us. So expect higher prices, if not shortages. The excessive wet in the winter didn't do the autumn sown wheat and cereals any good at all in many places. If you get, we call it wet feet. If you get wet feet, there's no real coming back from it. You're going to get way less yield than normal. And of course, many spring sowings were delayed and just all couldn't happen as well. So when you add into the amount of rewilding schemes and non-core food production that's occurred over the last 3 years, and you have to remember that these schemes don't usually sign you up for a year, you're signed up for 3 to 5 years. So once you're in for quite a while. It's all heading towards lowering our self-sufficiency. And there are other big drivers towards that as well. There's more people in the country now. So the more mouths to feed, the less food there is to go around. And you can't take the government seriously, I'm afraid, on the statistics that they put out about how self-sufficient we are. Because, according to their 2021 food security report, they state that British food security is in part due to having a wide variety of import sources. So,
right.
It's food security to them isn't about how much we can maximize how
exactly.
It's the fact that we don't just buy from one country externally, we buy from several. So we're way more food secure because it's not all just coming from America, it's coming from Egypt and everywhere else. So
this is something that I always struggle with, because in the First World War, and then particularly in the Second World War, when the ships that bringing in the food, the convoys and what have you, were being attacked, we had to suddenly go, hang on a minute, we've got to grow our stuff. And the whole idea that we would not sort of keep that in the back of our head, that actually we need to be self-sufficient should anything ever go off again, as a number one, and then anything we get from overseas is a luxury, the icing on the cake sort of situation. But as you've just described there, the government seems to have this idea, no, you have all the icing, the main ingredients to keep you going, the potatoes and veg and what have you, is irrelevant. And that's really bizarre.
Well, that's globalism for you.
Yes.
And that's decades of cheap food policy, which they refuse to protect farming and protect British agriculture because they won't address the political hot potato of honestly saying how much real good proper food costs and how much real support of your home farming actually is worth. And it's not just the financial value of that. Farming underpins everything in your society. And it is also another separation of powers, because farmers are independent family-owned businesses. So this is the absolute opposite to state-owned or communist-owned corporatism. So it is a separation of powers. And, yes, attacking our marine supply lines is a real threat, and it's an increasing threat in this geopolitical world that we're living in now. There's increased tensions, as we know. And there were 47 submarines, U-boats, sunk in the British Channel in the Second World War, tragically and sadly. 3 of them right by the narrow straits, the short straits between Dover and Calais. So, submarines can get anywhere to, in even the narrowest stretch of water surrounding us. So it is real, and we do need to protect against it. And the other thing I would say is the government published these statistics saying we're approximately 50% self-sufficient in the food. Every meal on our plate, approximately 50% of it is grown here in the British Isles. But they don't ever take into account full circular self-sufficiency. And by that, I mean, do we have everything here that we need to grow the product in the first place?
Oh, right. Yes.
That's no. So we can take an example of British beef production, and we are, due to the nature of our topography and our climate, we are largely self-sufficient in beef, about 85%, because we've got such a large amount of our western shores that are hilly and suitable primarily for livestock production due to our temperate oceanic climate. But we import about half of the replacement herds from Germany and Ireland. We import about half of the feedstuffs required to feed the animals when they're overwintered in barns or they're barn finished for a few months. And we're not even self-sufficient in our own hydrocarbons and the diesel that's required to fuel the whole of agriculture and the whole of the economy. So when you take in those full or circular and fertilizer as well, we're not self-sufficient in fertilizer at all by any means. I mean, nitrogen, we're about half sufficient, and nitrogen is made from natural gas, and we're now no longer net exporters of hydrocarbons. We have to import those. So it's
we're quite vulnerable then, really, to all sorts of outside forces.
We're hugely vulnerable, and the net zero policy is invading and destroying everything. I would say, look at our natural gas storage. We used to have huge undersea natural storage tanks that would give us weeks or months of a supply. They were decommissioned, and we've now got about a week's supply on board. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Once you scratch where net zero's what net zero has done with the deindustrialization and the outsourcing of heavy industry, aluminium smelting, the list goes on and on and on.
Yes. And so, I mean, I find it interesting that we continue down this path and nobody seems to be pushing back against it. And we've allowed these governments go on. Now, we're going to talk about your kind of standing in a minute and how you will be pushing back and putting your various proposals forward. But before we just get to that, I just want to address the rewilding thing, because this, there's a lot of people particularly on the left and others who will be going, but we've seen monoculture, we've seen the pesticides, the herbicides, they've sort of decimated and killed off all the insects. You used to drive around and the insects would hit the windscreen, and we don't see that, and we see bees are suffering and all the pollinators and the insects and all the important stuff. So we surely, species need to have a place of their own. Now, I've heard, of course, that, and I live very close to Knepp, where they've did with Isabel Tree on the estate there, and they did quite a large rewilding. They were a commercial farm, and I've read her book, and so they're very much into the whole rewilding thing, and they've got this sort of corridor of wildlife, which is all very nice in its own little area, but does it need to be everywhere? And the point is, it seems to me that actually you could have wildlife and farming coexisting together in harmony, that the actual wildlife would be helping the farmers by having the right sort of species of insects which would help get rid of the predators. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're taking the opposite team, should I say, are taking a few valid points which really come from the scaling up in the 70s of large-scale agriculture. Which are valid points about the risk of monocropping and the risks to farm diversity from those species diversity from those practices. The sort of infatuation phase, should I say, of large commercial farming in the UK. But and they are valid points, but they are being addressed, and farming practices change, and we have got a much more balanced approach now. And of recent decades, conversations around regenerative farming practices and the schemes that have been present, even under the Common Agricultural Policy, to support environmental benefit in wildlife corridors and things, they were sufficient. They were always sufficient. And if you wanted a little bit more of that, you would only have had to slightly increase the financial incentives for perhaps leaving a mature tree every 100 meters in your hedgerows. Just give a few extra quid to that part of the scheme every year. We didn't need to go on to this agricultural transition post-Brexit, because it's a deception. We were told that we were going to reclaim our sovereignty and be able to chart our own course and be self-determined post-Brexit. But we got the 2020 agricultural plan, which was a totally different type, a defunded amount of funding, I hasten to add. We've had less money, and we've been forced along with the narrative that we are in some kind of hysterical climate crisis, and therefore we need to move away from core food production and hugely subsidize wilding and other wildlife schemes. And it's completely wrong. It's a complete overreaction. And going back to my original point that farming practices do change, I've got an aerial photo of my land here from the 70s, and the hedgerows were way smaller. They were trimmed tighter, and there were less mature trees. And when you look at it, it's not even of my bit of land; it's all the surrounding area. And so it's not just this particular farm. What widely across my area now, it's way more green and verdant. There's way more trees and there's bigger hedgerows. So farming practices change, and you only need to slightly encourage it and say, look, do a 3 or a 6 meter strip of grass along every hedgerow, and you'll get an extra £100 a hectare or something, and a wildlife strip for bird food here or there. And farmers love that. I've never met a farmer who has got a negative attitude towards the environment at all. Yes, I know there's, slurries over spills here and there, and legislation is being put into place to solve those kind of environmental spill issues, which every industry has. They're not being particularly well funded by government, I would hasten to add. The dairy sector, especially the small dairy sector, which is struggling to take on these large capital investments to increase their slurry storage, should be better funded. But let's set that aside for now. We're not remiss as an industry at all. The larger threats come from unregulation of GMOs and precision breeding, the GE Act. I would say that's a greater threat, along with the general globalist policy. It's not protective to farmers. We've got no price protections. We have no price protections from global commodity prices. We're considered equal upon the world stage in terms of our scale of production. With wheat and cereals, for example, our farmers have to sell into the global market at the global market prices. And if there's a huge overproduction in India or China or Brazil, then we have to go along with that and sell at £160 a tonne, where break even for us is 150, and we get no minimum price protection. And that is one of the key policies that I've proposed on the Farmers Movement Cornwall campaign platform, that we should have for all commodity prices a minimum profitable price set, so that if we have a spike or a quick down surge in the price, our farmers will take a little subsidy from the government to help them out, so that they can't sell at the cost of production, because it's just not fair. We have to protect them. So there's
I mean, who does? Who does sell anything at the cost of production? You need to make some profit to reinvest.
Well, their argument is you're a self-contained business. You're floating on the high seas of commerce. Tough luck. Well, that's not nationalism, is it?
No.
If you take care of your own country, you have to see the value of every role that's undertaken through the lens of nationalist protection. We're not just farming businesses. We provide the food and the security for the whole nation, and we offer a separation of powers against corporate overreach as well. So and we're part of the thriving rural economy, with farm diversification projects that can have workshop spaces and all for woodland coppices or charcoal makers or woodland craftspeople. We are the people, it's our businesses who provide those diversification things for a surviving and thriving rural economy as well. So we're not just, we're more.
No, and who's going to get the blame when the shortages come in? You can bet your bottom dollar it'll be aimed at the farmers.
100%. And there's another narrative about farm subsidies that I always hear, which is that, you're just country landowners, you're wealthy already, and you're just bleating for more public money because you're just getting handouts. Well, that no. When you look at the basic payment scheme as it was originated just after the Second World War, and it was really a retaining scheme. It was put in place to make sure that in our national reserve we had enough acres there left in case we had another disaster of some kind. We could spin up agricultural production very quickly to provide what was needed for that scenario. So, in other words, don't build houses on it. Don't put permanent woodland in place. Keep it, even if it wasn't an environmental scheme, even if you weren't farming it, keep it there so it's there to be used. And the payments, really, they've only ever been in the area of 60 to 80 pounds an acre. Well, if you've ever owned a bit of land and you've got to trim the hedges, you've got to fix the fencing, you've got to restore stone walls, you've got to clear fallen branches or falling mature trees from storms and patch up the drainage and all the rest of it. It's only ever really been a contribution towards the management costs of having a bit of land, which is a productive asset for the nation. So it's never been a handout of any sort, and it was perfectly adequate in its original incarnation of the basic payment scheme, which through various countryside stewardship schemes gave little incentives for encouraging bushier hedgerows and things like that. So the whole thing's been skewed by globalism and its twin narrative of some climate crisis going on, and that we all need to radically change our thinking and our purchasing and our movement and everything accordingly. So it should be thoroughly rejected in my opinion.
So you're standing as an independent, and you've got a number of proposals. Let me ask you this, because I recently went to Lyme Down, which is in Wiltshire, in which something like just under 3,000 acres have been taken out of agricultural land and is going to be replaced with solar panels. And these are quite big. These are sun-seeking, tracking solar panels, along with these shipping container-sized batteries that are on great swathes of the countryside. So any poor sod who's living in that area is suddenly going to find their natural landscape being changed rather radically. To my mind, it's bad enough building houses on good quality agricultural land, but then to cover the land in these solar panels, in which will no doubt be poisoning the soil with radiation and various other things, and all the concrete and the wiring and everything else. Be interested to hear what your proposal would be for this type of thing if you're standing as an independent.
Oh, well, I'm completely opposed to any solar on farmland, full stop. In fact, I've got a Freedom of Information request in with Cornwall Council at the moment to try and find out exactly how many acres there are in the planning system. The government don't even make it easy for you to find out how many have been passed, because when you go to their online map, they don't list it. You have to sort of go along and add them all up. But even my lived experience tells me that there's quite a lot around. Just driving around Cornwall, you're seeing large developments popping up everywhere. So I've heard reports of about 6,000 acres being in the planning system at the moment, but I will have to wait to see what comes back from the council. But in any event, it has got to be resisted, because these things are, again, they're not for 2 or 3 years. They're signing up for 30 to 50 years. And yes, the payments to the farmers are amazing. And, being a farmer myself and knowing how the industry has been defunded and slowly sidelined for decades, you can't really blame the farmers for looking at this retirement option out. If they've got a farm business that's been struggling, their sons and daughters are less inclined to take that on in the transgenerational nature, and why should the farmer really push it upon them? I mean, my elder 2 children are in exactly the same situation. I've never actively encouraged them into the farming line, and they were both, neither of them were interested in it anyway. They'd gone in a different direction. So if you haven't got a really viable, comfortable thing to pass on, you're going to have to cash out at some point. And the rents are above £1,000 an acre per year. So for 50 years on a 100-acre farm, work it out. These are big, and we know why they're able to offer those, and it's because the green companies are being subsidized by our taxpayer money. It's not because this is just such a fantastic energy generation technology that's creating so much fantastic cheap power, because we know it's not. I'm not against solar panels. They've got a use case, and they've got a place where they're perfect for that, and that's on your roof. It's not in a field. So,
not in a field.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I totally agree. And we were told that when we went to the Lyme Down area in Wiltshire, they were being offered £1,000 an acre for it. And you think, well, yeah, that's great. I haven't got to get up at 4 a.m. and milk the cows twice a day, or to do whatever I've got to do, and all that investment in the various tractors and machinery that one would have. One can sit back. And a lot of the farmers, of course, are of that age now where they are retiring or want to retire, and it's very nice. The bigger picture, however, is if they do take these offers, of course, it's taking all that land out of agriculture, and it's ruining the chances for other people, younger people, or people of a similar age who want to get into farming, from having a go and contributing to the national food supply. How difficult is it, just as a matter of interest, for people to get into farming if existing farmers who have land or are tenant farmers no longer want to carry on because they've got these incentives? How easy is it for other people to get in who really want to give it a go?
Well, it's difficult. It's not being made easy, and there's so much more we could be doing. I'm glad to see that the under 5 hectare rule has now been passed, which means that small growers are now eligible to claim subsidy under the current system for amounts of land under the 5 hectare rule. So, about 12 acres. So that will really help small people coming in. But there's so much more that could be done towards that from local authorities. There could be planning easements for small market gardens. There's a case close to me where we've got objections to polytunnels going up because of visual impact. There should be planning easement for this sort of thing. There should be an analysis in every constituency where we look at how many growers there are locally and how many small people are producing food locally, because that's the basic level of food security. If you've got 10 or 12 little market gardens like mine are now in every parish, then you've got a better chance of food resilience. And so these should all be supported by local authorities. More of the county estate farms should be allocated for small growers, and like I say, there should be planning easements for what we call peri-urban areas. So these are the immediately these are the perimeters to any small villages that are green belt. I'm not saying you should be able to live there. I think there should still be financial tests to living on site. But when it comes to shackery or polytunnels, there should be no problems with establishing small patches of ground and having some infrastructure on there, as long as it can always be returned back to nature very easily and it's not of a permanent nature. There should be encouragement towards that sort of thing. So, and general funding. I mean, look at the farm budget. I mean, in 2019, under the Common Agricultural Policy, we had 4.7 billion allocated to the UK. Now, if you adjust that for inflation moving forward to today, that's 5.7 billion. And we're currently getting 3.1.
Right.
So we have been thoroughly defunded.
Yes.
And the way they've done it is they've bundled in the green environmental schemes in with the regular payments. That's how they did it. it was separate before under Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Now it's all been bundled together. And so we're on almost half. We would need to pretty much double the farm budget to get back to where we were and to be moving ahead. And included in that, of course, would be all these incentives for smaller growers. And I've got proposals for low interest loan schemes for all parts of agriculture on the Farmers Movement Cornwall Facebook page, because it's every part of the farming community that's important. It's not just the big farms, but the big farms. Yes. Oh, they do stuff on a big economy of scale, and that's good because it does create cheaper food. But the medium-sized family farms as well need to be supported, as do the small-scale new entrants. And if you had a low-interest loan scheme of, say, a 1% loan, I calculated that you could use about a third of the foreign aid budget, and that would be enough to support in every tax year to offer a £20,000 capital investment loan at a low interest rate. And that would be a huge support to a new entrant coming in, where even if they were renting a couple of acres, that 20,000 would afford the polytunnel and perhaps some basic tools and really get them going, with the shed for packing and that kind of things. And even at 0.25% interest rate, the money loaned would be returning money to the Treasury. So the whole thing could operate and be administrated and still actually return money as a profit to the Treasury, alongside giving vital help to all the people in agriculture. So we've got this huge wastage, in my opinion, of public money. And it's boondoggling on a weaponized scale. And if you don't know what a boondoggle is,
I was going to ask.
I would suggest go and have a look.
But boondoggling, I should go and check that out. Listen, so you've been thinking about this for a long time. You're a farmer. You're in at the deep end with food growing and all of that, and you've had your larger business and you've shrunk down, and you've obviously battled with the bureaucracy of all of this over all those years. Why? I mean, the question that an audience, I imagine, watching this and any of these debates with farmers talking about the problems of food supply, etc., is why is it that we have a government, or a series of governments, ever since I've been alive, it seems to be the case, who do not seem to listen or acquiesce to what the farmers and all other industries really want for a thriving economy? Why is it we have these anti-farming policies and not policies which the farmers could say, look, if you just left it to us, we'll tell you what we need and we'll get on with it and we'll have a much better system? Why are we always fighting the government?
Well, because we represent the old world that they're trying to get rid of, but their new world.
Yes.
And their new world is increasing monopoly and control by them and increasing servitude to them by us. And you only have to read the Sainsbury's Future of Food report or look at the amount of farmland that Bill Gates now owns in the United States of America and the novel food companies that he invests in to see what they want and what that's going to look like. So we run completely contrary to their globalist megalomania, should I say. So that's why we're feeling this increasing level of disconnection between political power and the people across the spectrum. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, nothing seems to be going right for us. And
absolutely.
They're so disconnected. There's a tiny minority who are completely off on cloud cuckoo land, on cloud, away with the fairies, let's say,
yes,
of their own agenda, and they're forcing it on us. It's coming from the top. It's coming from way beyond politics, from the political level. We know where it's from. It's coming from those who control the United Nations, who control the World Economic Forum, who control the World Health Organization. And they're telling the political classes who subscribe to them what to do to us. and it's coming from the top down to us. And that's why it's desperately important that we, the people, organize and we turn it on its head. We have to come up from the ground. We have to do a grassroots movement. It has to be populism, and it has to the power has to come back to us, because we are the power of any nation. It's not them.
Yes, they don't do anything. They don't grow anything. They don't make anything. I mean, when you think about it, they're so impotent, really, other than the fact that they control the money.
And our minds.
And our minds, very much so, yes. And if we can take back control of our minds and believe what is possible. So you're standing, and so what do you hope will happen in this next election? And what give us a quick list of perhaps some of the things that you propose so that people can be excited and look for a positive future.
Well, I hope that we will see a widening of the political conversation, the political landscape. As I mentioned earlier, there's been a narrowing down of the political conversation to this very centrist, super liberal, super authoritarian kind of world that we're living in now, best described as, I suppose, the sort of world of wokeism, But so I'm hoping that we're going to get that challenged. I'm hoping that we're going to see voices come out to say, no, we don't want to live like this. This doesn't represent us. This doesn't represent our traditional values, whether you consider yourself, to be part of a Christian country or a Christian faith, or, whether it's just traditional family values or respectful wealth creation, which is the original concept of conservatism. It was respectful, nationalist focused wealth creation. It was a meritocracy built on private property and built on competitive free enterprise. And it returned money back to the less fortunate in society in terms of the sort of philanthropic nature of our sort of feudal times where the lord, not everyone obviously, but the good lords would take care of the people on their estates, because why wouldn't you? If they were working you and upkeeping your land, and you wanted the fittest, healthiest, best educated people in your manor as possible. To do otherwise, you'd be a maniac. So, they were the original roots of conservatism, free enterprise, what I would call Christian nationalism. And I'm hoping we're going to see a return to that. We're seeing it with Reform, Reform UK, which I do support. Of any of the larger parties out there, I'm most aligned with those in any way. I retain some suspicions about them, but generally I think they're pretty good, and I'm keen to see what's going to happen with those in the election and post the election. It's not beyond possibility that they could actually really surprise us and take a considerable share of the vote. I think they will get some MPs in, and at least we'll have a voice further to the right present in our everyday lives, should I say. And I think that's healthy. My role as an independent, I believe, has got a role to play in that conversation as well, because independents have the freedom to choose policy from wherever it happens on the political spectrum, for good policy, should I say. And again, that harks back to my point about the inherent socialist policies, which actually were there in the original concepts of conservatism. I don't advocate for socialism, because that comes from another place. That comes from communism, something which I'm completely opposed against. But socialist policies, for example, full privatization of our transportation systems and subsidy to public transport, is something that I 100% agree. And that's a very socialist policy. And you can see that the benefits of that, even if you go to a European country like Spain, which I do for my holidays occasionally. You get on the public transport there, and why would you bother with a car on holiday? The buses are so frequent, they're not expensive, they're in good condition, absolutely brilliant. So an independent has the freedom to cherry pick, if you like, best policy from wherever it happens. So it is a new approach, and it's extending that conversation. And you have the freedom to choose, and you have the freedom to speak your mind and to not be controlled by the party
Yes.
or the whip, as they say.
What I was going to say, yes.
We've seen the benefit of that already. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with Andrew Bridgen and his fantastic work that he's been doing. He's a leading light in the movement, and he's part of the Independence for Direct Democracy movement, which is separate to the main movement. There's the direct movement, direct democracy movement in the UK. Then there's the Independence for. So there's two groups pushing for this. It's all good because the incumbent two-party pantomime, I'll call it, needs to be overturned. There needs to be some competition in the marketplace, and independents resonate with people because we are people from our communities stepping out. We're everyday people stepping forward to represent our people in our local communities. We're not top down. We're coming from the grassroots up, and that resonates. And
I think we need to see that now, don't we? More than any other time, rather than these elites who've been to certain schools and are career politicians in their slick suits who cannot answer questions directly and give you a yes or no, who've been trained and give you smarmy replies. People, I think, and it's true with social media as well, people are thronging to people like myself and many of the other channels who were putting things in layman's terms, who are answering as clearly as they can, rather than these very corporate, these very protective and these very cautious words and phrases, that this word salad that makes no sense actually in the end. People want real people. And I think if you start to see real people coming forward to say, actually, you know, I'll put myself up above the parapet, I think the rest of the people, we're ready for it more than any other time.
They absolutely are. And that's my experience of being out and about talking to people with some of the policies that I've put out there. People are desperate for some common sense and some real people.
Aren't they just?
Really, really are. And they are so dispossessed politically. They are politically homeless and are the silent majority. And it's huge. If you look at the local elections or the mayoral elections that have happened recently in other parts of the UK, you know, you've seen voter turnouts of 27%. I mean, even in the general election, we only normally get about 65, 66%. So this is shocking.
Absolutely. Well, we need to see these faces more and more on our you know, because the media is controlled and everything. We need to see these ordinary, everyday people rather than these slick, polished people, so that people know they're out there and there is an actual choice, which is, of course, what you're doing.
Yes, I mean, and if I serve to do nothing more than through my policies and through my approach and the electoral reforms like the direct democracy, frequent referendum model, etc. If my platform just helps to put that conversation out there, so that a more established party that has got some promise, such as Reform UK, for example, if I only serve to encourage policy in that direction through those, then I'm happy, because personally, I don't mind who takes on any of my policies. It's my policies that I believe are good.
Yes.
For things. So I'm not doing this because I want a career in politics. I'd have been quite happy just pootling along, self-retired, and reading more books.
Absolutely. Well, you and me both there. That's a passion I also share.
You know, I've got 1,000,001 things I could have been doing.
Yes.
But so I'm doing this to do that. It's to reconnect people, and it's healthy for society to be reconnected with your politics. And we see that in countries like Switzerland, which are under the direct democracy electoral model, where they have frequent referendums. Anything of significant national interest triggers a referendum. But even on the local level, council spending above a certain level can be voted on. So people really care. They connect. And it's the social health the social well-being, the economic well-being of a country like Switzerland, in even the national debt. It's a country mile ahead of where we are now. So we know we've been dragged down to a place that's just really not good, and we've got to get out of that. So
well, let's hope that people are beginning to wake up, and they've had the responsibility for everything taken from them, so much so that they're sort of almost asleep. But let's hope that in recent times, with all these anti-human policies that we've seen, and the spraying of the skies, the fluoridization of the water, and all the other things that seem to have crept in that nobody's actually asked for or wanted or demanded, that people start to look to the independents. We've sort of run out of time for our interview, but Peter, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. I wish you the best of luck with your campaign, also with your farming, and that we can bring back those small family-run farms who can support the locality, as you said before, with their various different schemes, whether that's veg boxes or just being there. Because if you can see the food being produced, you can see the animals and how they're catered for and looked after, you've got a lot of trust then in those locals, rather than nipping into the supermarket from something that's come across the world, been processed, full of all sorts of other things, all the nutrients removed. It's got to be a better way for everybody.
It has, and people do know it. And the good news is it's not rocket science.
No, exactly.
It's common sense. It's agricultural policy. It's just getting the right message out there, and it's waking people up and getting them into the real world to do stuff. As good as social media is, it's playing a fantastic part, but we're at the stage now. They've upped the ante against us. There's no doubt about that. So they've stepped up their game. We need to do the same. You've got to get out every Saturday, every weekend if you can, form a local group, do your social media stuff, but also get feet on the street. Even if it's just a social meetup, who knows what's going to come from that? You could sit there one day and say, well, there's not that much access to local food in this area. We could look at the PFFA, who I know you're familiar with, and we could use some of their software to set up a food hub. We could do, there's 1,000,001 things you could do, or even just supporting your local independent candidate. If there's somebody, you could just do work to help them. It's all good and it's all easily done. We just need to get on with it now. So it's time to get feet on the street as well.
Fantastic. Pete, where can people find you if they are interested in contacting you or get more about your campaign and stuff?
Well, I'm self-funded, so I haven't got any fancy website yet or any highfalutin marketing campaign or anything like that. But I'm just using Facebook for now. It's not my first option, but it's just the most accessible platform. So there's the Farmers Movement Cornwall Facebook page, the group page. You can find all my policies and other bits and bobs on there. And I've also set one up for the election as well. So that's Peter Lawrence, independent for Truro and Falmouth. If you search for either of those, you can find me. And
I'll get you to send me the links, and I'll put that in the description. So,
sure.
Just to make life easier for people, because you know what they're like.
All right.
They like it all done for them. So we'll do that as well. But Peter, good luck. Thank you so much for talking with us and sharing what's going on in Cornwall, particularly. And, of course, encouraging people to get those boots on the ground and make a difference. We can't do it from sitting on the sofa and watching mainstream media and hoping someone else will do it. We can all make the difference. And that's what we need to do. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciated it.
It's a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, Richard.
Thank you. I certainly will. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. I will be back with more monologues and interviews, of course. But until then, from Peter and I, wishing you a great weekend. Bye for now.